Hello everyone, welcome back in the course of Introductions to Cultural Research. So today we are going to continue our discussions to the next topic, which is about the field investigations of the cultural research. So the objective of this meeting is that firstly, you'll be able to understand the basic principle in making the questions, especially your research questions regarding to your cultural research. And number two, you will be able to understand the ethical methodology as well as the criteria when you go to the field visit. Welcome to the first slide. First one is regarding to the formulations of the questions. So according to this one, your research questions should be short, simple, and the most importantly is that your questions should reflect what you are going to investigate and the answer should be measurable. So here there are four types of the questions that you can formulate. Number one is descriptive questions. So the descriptive questions in cultural research refer to the basic explanations about what phenomena or cultural phenomena that you investigate, and you can describe it vividly. So you will use lots of adjectives regarding to the place, events, and other phenomena. Example that we have for the questions in descriptive types of questions is that number one, are the implementations of Islamic banking relevant to current Islamic society, for example? So the patterns, sometimes you can follow this pattern, are blah 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 common for blah blah blah. So for example, when we take a look at Lampung context, are Mumbai Lawo, for example, common for particular ethnic groups in Lampung? You can mention like Lampung Saibatin, Lampung Bobian, and etc. So the purpose of descriptive questions is that you try to find out the answer as many as possible. Now moving on to the second types of the questions, which is causal questions. Usually, causal questions is indicated by the use of question word why. So we find out the causes of certain phenomena or like the underlying factors why certain or particular society have or holding certain of rituals. For example here, why do societies in Ijen conducting a ceremony? Or why is it important for Javanese to have Temon Manten? So the basic answers that we are going to find out is that the reason behind the phenomena is conducted. Moving on to type 3 of these research questions, which is about consequence questions. Consequence questions is related to the informations that we are going to find out, especially that we are going to know about the impacts or further implications why certain phenomena happens. It can be related to, for example, consequence in the terms of economy, in the terms of social relationship, in the terms of politics, in the terms of the environmental considerations, and etc. For example, you can use as simple as what are the effects of blah 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 in particular society. And the last one is that non-directional relations questions. So in this context, you try to find out the relationship between two variables. So the common questions that you can formulate here is that, is there a relationship between A and B? Or what are the relationship between A culture to B cultures? So here, you're trying to find out how these two variables cooperate one another and how these two variables influence each other. Usually, in cultural research, you should also consider about the hypothesis. So creating the hypothesis here should not be explicitly written in your research, but at least when you draft certain proposal, you should consider that there will be something happen to this particular society. There might be an effect of this phenomena to this particular society, for example. So in this context, making the hypothesis is important to know that you want to predict whether your hypothesis is correct or not. Then you validate this through the field research. So the hypothesis here is like your prediction or your forecast towards certain phenomena in society. For example, right now, is it still relevant to conduct, let's say, A until Z levels or steps in wedding ceremony, whether it's real relevance today or not? Then you make research to know the relevancy, but you come up with the prediction first, that maybe you say that I think that is not relevant, or I think that it is still relevant but through particular context. By having that hypothesis, it's important for you later to know like how far you should take an actions in your research, and also at least it become your guidance, so you're still on the track in doing this cultural research. Now moving on to the slide 3, which is about analyzing the patterns, what happened in society. So here, there are at least 3 measurements that we can observe toward certain cultural phenomena. Number 1 is nominal measurements. Nominal measurements here related to calculating certain numbers of phenomena or events or other cultural activities. For example, in the context of a culture, for example, in Batak cultures, how many types of ulos do Batak people have? So the answers maybe there are maybe 5 types, 6 types, 10 types, 20 types, and etc. That's what we call as nominal measurements. So this will become the guidance for you when later you want to do, let's say, the descriptive analysis, like what we have explained to you in slide 1. So by knowing the types, that for example we have 5 types of ulos, each type later you can describe it. Number 2 is that ordinal measurement. When we talk about ordinal measurement, it's talking about the hierarchy, like how many steps, how many layers that we have. So when we conduct the first step, then we can go to the next step. For example, when we talk about language, we talk about ordinal measurement. How many level of politeness in Javanese? And the answer is 3. That consists of, for example, kromo inggil, kromo madio, and also ngoko. So we have 3. This is the, let's say, the strata. We talk about ordinal measurements. And number 3 is ratio measurements. Ratio means that it's like comparison, like 1 compared to certain communities. For example, in the context of the government system in a village, in the context of any cultures in Indonesia, like one particular ethnic groups or particular tribes will handle how many peoples or how many families. So it's like 1 versus 25 family in one what we call rukun warga or rukun tetangga. So we talk about this, like another example is that usually when we hold the luxury wedding ceremony in one sub-district, how many of them per regions that afford or that are able to conduct this big ceremony. So in that context, so we'll know like the comparison, like 1 sub-district there are 5, so 1 in compare to 5. So that's what we call as ratio measurements. So we have at first nominal measurements, number 2 ordinal measurements, and number 3 is ratio measurements. Okay, now let's move to the next context, which is about data collections. Here, like other research, maybe you have in another course of linguistic research methodology or literature's linguistic methodology. When we talk about data, we talk about primary data and secondary data. And especially here in our course, my concern is that you will find the primary data, which is the data that you should get directly to the field. You interview people, you interview common people in particular regions, you interview the head of the village, you interview those who hold the events, and etc. Now, here, your data will be collected through the questionnaires, interview, and also direct survey of our observations. Second of all is that we also have the secondary data that helps you to support your analysis later, that you can get from books and then from journals and other supporting documents. Okay, now after we know about, this is primary data and secondary data, now we move to the targets, which is we have what we call as respondents and we also have what we call as participants. So what is the difference between respondent and participants? If respondents, sometimes we just give like a questionnaires for them and then they are not the one who really experience that one, particular cultures. We do not give like say deep interview for each of them. But when we talk about informants, informant is like the key persons in our research. Like they know more about the conditions of the village, they know more about the language that they use, they know more about A to Z steps they do in a particular events or cultural events. So that's what we call. Sometimes when we talk about participants, it'll be related to how knowledgeable they are, how familiar they are with the cultures, and then whether it is clear for them to speak the language or not. Okay? Second of all, don't get confused with the idea of subject of the research and object of the research. So here, object of the research is the thing that you observe, not the people that you observe. The people that we observe, we call it as the subjects of the research itself. And the last one is that whether when you want to do a sampling, it is purposive with certain criteria or random sampling with no certain criteria. So is that clear for you? Yes. The last one is that getting access to the participants. Sometimes it's very hard for you to go to the field and directly meet the people. So you should know the procedural or administrations. At first, sometimes you need a letter from your campus or your institutions and then come to the head of the village, ask the permission what you are going to do, and then you need this head of the village and also the people that work in the village governments to help you to find the participants. And the next one, you should also consider about the ethical methodology when you ask them and interview them, whether it is okay to record or not. So this is very important things to do when you are going to conduct these researches. Okay, so this is the end. Furthermore, please read the textbook that we have already given to you, and let's do the exercise, and hopefully you get more understanding about the basic concept of the executing this cultural research, especially in the terms of its methodology. So thank you very much and see you in another meeting.